Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now this week we're taking on an enemy with similar powers to our own who we helped create and disabling a big blue sky beam as we tackle the MCU. Now with the release of the Marvel Avengers video game, I thought it was about time that I took a look at everyone's favourite 20+ movie spanning franchise and have a deeper look at Earth's mightiest heroes. Now the MCU is in a tricky place for a number of reasons, largely because of its own success. First of all, they have to follow up the beautifully crafted Infinity Saga, somehow lowering the stakes now so that not every film is an escalation, and at the same time they have to set up a new big battle they'll fight in this sort of accumulation of this new phase. On top of that, they also have to sort of introduce new heroes and as well as that forefront existing heroes who played smaller parts before, without relying on your Iron Man and your Captain America. And that's not even to cover the Disney Plus series. They need to balance this really well with the main MCU films, without sort of making the series a bit less important, still sort of having a significance in their storylines while also not removing them entirely from the main films. Of course, this is a huge juggling act. And of course, Marvel also needs to somehow navigate the truly sad news of Chadwick Boseman's passing, who I'm sure was going to play a big, pivotal role going forward in these films. Feige and co now need to somehow strike a balance between honouring his memory and not sort of glossing over his death, and at the same time doing justice to that whole faction of the ensemble, that whole Wakanda section, and sort of making sure T'Challa has a lasting legacy going forward. So with all of these thoughts in mind, I started to think, what could the Avengers look like going forward? Who's going to be leading the Avengers? Who's even going to be in the lineup going forward? And in fact, are the Avengers, as we even know them, still going to exist? In this video, I'm going to try and tackle some of these questions and sort of give a few ideas as to what I think they could do. Now these aren't sort of a prediction per se, they're not even my ideal scenario. These are just some sort of scenarios and just some sort of roster of people that I think that they could run with in the next Avengers film. Now first of all, in general, I think we're going to see a much more flexible Avengers going forward. I don't think we're going to have this sort of main core Avengers like we did in the Infinity Saga. Instead, I think a few sort of regular recurring teams are going to come back. People will chop and change, we'll get new people coming in all the time. Overall, basically, Marvel have a huge roster of heroes that they now need to balance. Not all of them can be in every Avengers film, or we'll just have like 100 Infinity Wars and Endgames going forward. And no one really wants to see that. We want to be able to scale it back a little bit. I think what they're going to do going forward is they're really going to have a bunch of they're going to deal a lot more with individual relationships with different heroes. Maybe explore some unusual pairings and that kind of stuff. But as I said, I don't think there's going to be this sort of main unit that never changes. So with that being said, I think there's sort of two major core aspects that could play a big part going into the Avengers going forward. Of course, you've got sort of the main home front Avengers. I think they'll sort of have this sort of new Avengers lineup that kind of follows suit from the sort of lineup that followed before. You'll have the sort of main Earth-based heroes that will be the recurring Avengers. And again, these might change, people might drop in and that kind of stuff. And on top of that, for a little bit now, we've been being teased about some sort of thing that's going on in space with Nick Fury. Now, of course, we got the post-credit scenes that we've been seeing in a few of the films, and I think that what will happen here is Nick Fury will be setting up some sort of equivalent to S.W.O.R.D., which from the comic books and a few of the sort of TV shows and the cartoons, is a kind of more attack interstellar version of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think somehow they're definitely going to introduce this, whether it kind of replaces the Avengers as we know them going forward, or is sort of just what the Avengers will be. It will sort of be S.W.O.R.D., but under the name Avengers, and this is just what they are now. They're just an interstellar sort of agency. Who knows what they're going to do exactly? I'm quite excited to see what they're going to do. Obviously, this whole Nick Fury thing has got a lot of people guessing about what might happen, and regardless of what else happens with the Avengers, I think that this will definitely play a big part into the overall storyline of this sort of upcoming phase. Now, what does this mean for the lineup of the Avengers? Well, I'm going to start by talking about some of the heroes who I think have good reasons to not be included in this sort of first iteration. And then later on, I'll go into a few of the ones who I think will definitely be part of it, or at least look very likely to play a part in this. So starting off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, of course, I think the Guardians of the Galaxy are definitely going to remain in contact. A few people there, like Nebula and Rocket, made some really good friends on the main Avengers team. However, they've got their own stuff to deal with, as we've already seen. They flew away at the end of Endgame, and I think they're going to get on with their own stuff, whether that be chasing down where Gamora might be now, and sort of dealing with a lot of the void that's been left in the galaxy by Thanos' now random absence. He's just sort of, his whole empire has now just kind of disappeared, and what are the cracks that are going to be left behind going to be? The Guardians, I'm sure, will explore that. And on similar lines to that as well, Captain Marvel I don't think will be in the next Avengers. She probably will be going forward, she'll definitely be a big part in it, but she's got a lot to deal with, especially in the wake of Thanos' absence as well. Similar to her absence from Infinity War, she's got a lot more planets to deal with and a lot of problems that are definitely going to be sort of too big for her not to take care of. Next up is any of the heroes that have a Disney Plus series coming up. Now, this isn't to say that they won't feature going forward, because of course they will. I mean, people like Scarlet Witch, for example, she's so powerful, I don't think that they're going to get rid of her now from the main sort of movies. However, I just don't think with the sort of setting up of their own storylines outside of the movies that they're going to be in this next lineup. So that means that Falcon, the Winter Soldier, Wanda, Vision, and of course Hawkeye probably won't be included. Loki as well, but he's not really an Avenger. I know he sort of had a sort of arc, but the Loki that we know that's going to be in the Disney Plus series is very much sort of his eviler self. We'll see what happens with that going forward. Now for the trickier ones, and starting off with the very difficult case, of course, of Black Panther. Now what I think should happen with Black Panther is that they should have Shuri kind of leading that part of the franchise, whether that be sort of taking up the mantle and moniker of Black Panther herself, or some other variation, maybe with her own name and her own kind of deal going on. However, I don't think that whatever this will be should sort of be in the next Avengers movie, except maybe as a sort of cameo alluding to the fact that they're still out there and still sort of getting on with their own business. I just think that with the sort of backseat that this franchise has been put on a little bit with Chadwick Boseman's passing, I think they need to take their time and sort of reevaluate what this new sort of Black Panther is going to be going forward. And it'll be a bit too soon to introduce them into the next Avengers lineup, whenever that may be. Now for the interesting case of Thor. Now Thor's in a very weird position because at the end of Endgame, he obviously flew off with the Guardians, off to have a sort of marauding space adventure doing whatever he was doing in Ragnarok. Now I think this is really exciting, however, from all of what we've seen of Thor Love and Thunder, it includes a lot of his sort of Earth-based supporting cast, including Valkyrie, Korg, the likes of that, and of course Jane Foster. Now this is really interesting because basically it depends on the events of the film. If Thor ends up jetting off once again with the Guardians, leaving sort of Earth in the hands of Valkyrie and the Thor Jane Foster, then we'll see probably one of them link up with the Avengers. Thor will have bigger fish to fry, similar to Captain Marvel and the Guardians themselves, and of course we won't see it. However, if he ends up staying on Earth, he'll obviously have a pivotal sort of maybe even leadership role in the new Avengers lineup. It's interesting to see what's going to happen, but we won't know until the film comes out. On that note, I'm now going to talk about a few more heroes who I think are pretty much certainties for the next Avengers lineup, and beginning that with Spider-Man. Now of course Spider-Man is a little bit of a difficult one, obviously his rights are still somewhat held by Sony and that kind of stuff, but I just cannot see an Avengers lineup without him. Provided of course in his solo film he's able to sort out his sort of public image sort of problems that he's having. That with J. Jonah Jameson and Mysterio sort of causing doubts and sort of revealing who he is. Provided he can sort that out, I think he'll be a mainstay, and I think he'll sort of continue this sort of Stark protege arc that he's got going on at the moment. Next up, a surefire inclusion must be the Hulk in whatever form he might be in. However, I don't think he'll be as much of a sort of physical asset going forward. I think he'll be more like the sort of man in the tower, who's able to obviously deal out a bit of a battering to any sort of drone who might sneak his way. Of course, he'll still be able to get involved in the fight if he needs to, but I don't think that's going to be his major thing going forward. Also, with Stark's absence, I think that he'll have an ally in Hank Pym. Of course, Hank Pym sort of had a problem with Tony Stark, and that's sort of what kept him away from the Avengers, but I don't think he'll have any reason anymore going forward. And the sort of banter he might have with Bruce Banner would be quite good. On top of that, of course, he will lend Ant-Man and the Wasp into the fight to help out. Now the kind of interesting case of Doctor Strange. Again, it really depends what's going to happen in the Multiverse of Madness. Will he still even be on Earth, or will he be in some sort of weird dimension? I'm not sure. However, I think that his presence on the team will be a really pivotal one, and I think just for sort of a balancing kind of thing, they'll find a reason to put him in the Avengers. They kind of need a new father figure in the absence of sort of Tony Stark and Captain America, and I think that he will fit this role pretty well. Now also, of course, at the time of recording, I don't know what happens in Black Widow. And whatever sort of happens going forward, I think there might be some level of Black Widow being involved. I don't know how exactly this will happen, whether somehow they found a way to not kill her in the films somehow, or whether that just be sort of Florence Pugh's version of Black Widow that might be in the sort of lineup going forward. However this might happen, I think that she'll definitely be included somehow. Maybe not in the Avengers though. I think it's more likely that the sort of Florence Pugh or maybe the Scarlett Johansson brought back to life will be somewhere with Nick Fury, sort of setting up his new sword base. He'll be somewhere hanging out on a sort of space station together. I think this is the most likely scenario for this character. Finally, to bring this back to the sort of start of the video, I think something they could definitely look into doing in the next Avengers film is bringing in Kamala Khan, otherwise known as Miss Marvel. Now with her sort of prominence in the new Avengers game that we've seen in some of the trailers and early gameplay footage, I think that there's no way that they're not going to include her going forward as a sort of majorish part of the Avengers team. Now whether this be because she's maybe an intern who we don't know about her powers, who's sort of hired at the new Avengers HQ, or maybe she's part of some sort of Avengers Academy or something of sort of upcoming superheroes that we don't know about. Either way, I think her role is basically going to be our eyes into the new Avengers. We're going to see sort of through her sort of experience what a new iteration of our favourite heroes is going to be. So there we go, that's my thoughts on what I think the Avengers will look like going forward, particularly in regards to the heroes that we've already seen and already know about. Now of course this isn't everyone, with sort of Shang-Chi and the Eternals and sort of Blade, Moon Knight and She-Hulk all mentioned. Who knows what the Avengers lineup will look like in a few years' time. But what do you think? Who do you think will definitely be assembling next time? And who's got bigger fish to fry? Let us know in the comments down below, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. All your support that you've shown us so far has been fantastic and we really appreciate it, and we hope you continue backing us going forward. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on your left.